Some of you are praying hard, but your bedroom is silently canceling your progress. The voice is steady, calm, but carrying the weight of someone who has seen what others only suspect. No greeting, no pause, just revelation, the kind that makes the heart freeze before the mind catches up. You keep asking why your breakthroughs delay, why every time you fast, something collapses right after, why the same dream keeps returning, leaving you breathless at 3 a.m., unable to explain the heaviness sitting on your chest as if watching you. You blame work, you blame people, you blame timing. But there's a reason your spirit feels drained instead of strengthened, even after prayer. And it is closer to you than any enemy outside your walls. It waited until you were asleep, until your defenses were lowered, until your voice was quiet and your spirit unguarded. Because behind the scenes, while your eyes were closed, something darker was lurking. Something far more threatening than you ever imagined, or so it seemed. And the worst part? You welcomed it in without knowing. Not through a ritual, not through candles, but through something so common you never questioned it. You placed it there yourself, right beside you, within reach, where it could watch you breathe. Nobody told you what it was doing. Nobody explained how it gained permission without your awareness. How it sat silently through nights of prayer or nights when you were too tired to pray at all. How it waited, patient, unchallenged. Because you never once considered that the attack wasn't coming from the outside, but already inside. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to confess is the reason I speak cautiously when people say, "Nothing is wrong with my room." I used to say the same. I used to think prayer alone covered everything. I used to believe my room was just a room. Until the manifestations became too consistent to ignore. The sudden arguments, the financial strain, the back-to-back disappointments, the strange fatigue that appeared only at home, the dreams that felt too real, too repeated, too targeted to be random. I realized these were signs, not coincidences, not imagination, but warnings. And each warning pointed to one place, where I slept. If you feel called out by these words, stay with this voice. Do not look away. Do not scroll. Because right now, something in your spirit already recognizes what your mind hasn't admitted yet. You sense that something has been working against you in silence, something that doesn't shout, doesn't destroy all at once, but slowly reduces what should be rising, step by step, night after night, while you breathe peacefully, unaware. This is why you feel stuck even after doing everything right. Why progress slips through your fingers, why your fire for prayer rises, then suddenly fades, then rises again, then fades again, as if something keeps draining the flame right where you sleep. You don't need to panic, but you do need to listen. Because this is where the confession begins, where revelation meets testimony, where the truth I once ignored becomes the truth you can't unhear. Someone needs this warning before they go to bed tonight. And before this is over, you'll understand what's been given access and how to take it back. And I'm not talking about immorality. I'm not talking about sleep habits. I'm talking about spiritual permissions you didn't know you were giving. One breath, held for just a moment, as if the next sentence could rewrite the last year of your life. Let that settle. Because once you see what I saw, you won't walk back into your room the same way again. After studying spiritual warfare patterns, after hearing testimonies from former occult practitioners who finally spoke what they once hid, after counseling believers who prayed passionately but never seemed to progress, one truth kept returning, not as a theory, not as a guess, but as a repeated reality. The bedroom is one of the most legally accessed spaces in spiritual warfare. Not because you're weak, not because your prayers don't work, but because permission can exist where awareness does not. There are 3 things commonly found in bedrooms that quietly block progress. They don't make noise, they don't announce themselves, but they interfere with destiny more often than open attacks ever do. And the third one is the most dangerous, because people defend it. They justify it, they protect it. Some even pray over it, never realizing they're shielding the very thing working against them. Hold on to that, because once we reach that point, you'll understand why so many breakthroughs collapse right where people sleep. She prayed with consistency, every morning before work, every night before bed. Her Bible stayed on the nightstand, not as decoration, but because she lived in it. Yet, Doors kept closing. The job opportunity that seemed certain suddenly vanished. A partnership she hoped would restore her finances fell apart at the last minute. Conversations about marriage turned cold without warning, as if something invisible pushed every relationship away just when peace was near. And clarity? The more she prayed for direction, the more her thoughts tangled, like a map with every path scratched out. But the part she rarely admitted to others was this: the heaviness was strongest at night. Not always in her body, sometimes just in her spirit. Some nights she woke up feeling watched, though she could never explain why. Other nights she lay awake for hours, exhausted in mind yet unable to fall asleep, only to oversleep and wake feeling spiritually flat, like her prayers weren't reaching past the ceiling. Still she pressed on, prayed harder, fast after fast, midnight intercessions, weeks turned into months, and still nothing changed. Quiet frustration settled in, not with God, but with herself. She whispered words she never wanted anyone to hear. Maybe it's me. Maybe something is wrong with me. Her voice trembled when she said it, because confessing that felt like stepping toward a cliff she wasn't sure she could return from. Then came the turning point, unexpected, unforced. One night, after another prayer session that left her feeling strangely weaker, she didn't ask for breakthrough. She didn't ask for open doors. She prayed just one sentence, barely above a whisper: "Show me what I'm overlooking." No thunder, no visions, just a still awareness, like a quiet nudge to look around her own room, really look, instead of assuming everything was harmless. Her eyes moved slowly across the familiar space. Nothing seemed unusual, until she paused at something she had owned for years, something she never once questioned. It wasn't glowing, it wasn't frightening, but something in her spirit tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. She didn't throw it away in panic. She didn't shout. She simply removed it, placed it outside her room, and whispered, "If this has been working against me, I release every permission I gave without knowing." The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniable. Within days, her sleep changed first, deeper, calmer, like rest was finally rest. Her prayers carried strength again, not strain. An opportunity she thought was lost, reopened, without her chasing it. She woke one morning and said to herself, "I feel like I can breathe again." Relief didn't come as fireworks. It came as clarity, as if a fog she didn't know she was living in finally lifted, slow enough to notice, clear enough to trust. And from that moment on, she stopped assuming every battle began outside her life. Because her turning point started the night she finally asked the question she avoided for too long: what in my room has permission I never meant to give? If this is already speaking to you, comment, "Open my eyes." Stay with me, this gets deeper. The tone sharpens, not harsh, but precise, like truth finally putting its hand on the table. The first thing that quietly interferes with progress is simple, common, and often sentimental. Objects that carry spiritual memory. Not idols, not symbols you instantly recognize as wrong, but items connected to old seasons, old relationships, old versions of yourself. Things you never prayed over, yet placed permanently in the most personal room of your life. A shirt from someone who wounded you deeply, but you kept it because it's still good. Letters that carried promises never fulfilled. A gift from someone you no longer speak to, yet their presence lingers because their memory has a seat in your room. Photos, accessories, personal items, harmless in appearance, but attached to moments you never healed from. These things don't shout, they don't glow or move, but they anchor atmospheres. They hold emotional residue, spiritual residue, reminders of who you used to be, not who you're becoming. You pray for new strength, new identity, new alignment, but sleep inches away from items tied to the version of you that struggled, cried, or stayed silent when you should have spoken. And here's the part many overlook. Spirits respect placement, not intention. What you place in your room tells a story, not just to you, but to whatever watches for access. You didn't mean to give permission. You didn't mean to hold on to the past. But by keeping certain objects close, especially where you sleep, you created a space where yesterday still has influence over today. That's why progress sometimes feels slow, why emotional patterns repeat, why you feel lighter when traveling but heavy at home. Because your room doesn't reflect who you are now, it reflects who you were when those items first entered your life. The shift begins when awareness begins. When you stop asking only, "Is this useful?" and start asking, "Does this carry a memory I no longer want anchored to my spirit?" Because the moment you remove what no longer belongs, your room becomes a place for who you're becoming, not a shrine to who you survived. But removing objects alone didn't fix everything, because the second issue wasn't an object. It was alignment. There was another believer, disciplined, sincere, alert in the spirit. Their bedroom was clean, organized, and filled only with things that pointed toward faith. Scriptures on the wall, worship music before sleep, journals stacked neatly on the desk. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing looked wrong. Yet stagnation clung to their life with a quiet persistence. They prayed with authority, but woke up tired. They rebuked attacks, but struggled to finish assignments that once came easily. Their minds stayed clear in the daytime, yet their dreams repeated like a loop. The same hallway, the same unfinished task, the same voice calling, but never revealing its face. Some mornings they opened their eyes and whispered, "Why do I feel like I ran all night?" Even after restful sleep, exhaustion sat on their shoulders before their feet touched the floor. They looked around their room more than once, wondering if something material was the cause. But everything looked holy, peaceful, intentional. So they kept pressing forward, until the same quiet question came to them that once came to someone else. "Show me what I'm overlooking." This time, the answer didn't point to an object. It pointed to how the room was positioned, where the bed faced, what direction the head rested, how the room was used, not just what was inside it. Nothing dramatic, no symbols, no markings, just a subtle alignment that allowed old emotions and old patterns to stay active, as if the past still had a seat where the future was trying to unfold. The correction wasn't complicated. It didn't require throwing anything away. It required changing placement, shifting the bed, rearranging the desk, reclaiming a corner that had become a silent storage of unfinished thoughts. It felt uncomfortable at first, like moving furniture that carried memories of a season they never questioned. But once the adjustment was made, something subtle began to shift. Not instantly, but surely. Sleep became deeper. Dreams slowly changed tone, from confusion to clarity, from being chased to walking forward, from silence to direction. And progress, small, steady, undeniable, returned like strength that had never truly left, only been redirected. They finally understood something they once shrugged off. Not everything that looks harmless is spiritually neutral. The room didn't need new objects, it needed new alignment, and alignment became the doorway to momentum that prayer alone had been struggling to unlock. Type, "I receive clarity" if you're still watching. Share this with someone who keeps feeling stuck. The second hidden barrier is subtle, yet it quietly undermines progress every night. It's when bedrooms are treated as multi-purpose spiritual spaces, where rest, entertainment, arguments, and prayer all mix together without order, where laughter, frustration, and intercession all occupy the same corner, without clear spiritual boundaries. The problem isn't prayer. The problem isn't work. The problem is what you allow in your personal space without distinction. A room should be a sanctuary, not just physically, but spiritually. Every item, every activity, every habit in that space carries permission for what is allowed to operate there. And when chaos, heaviness, or unprocessed emotion is tolerated, your bedroom becomes a negotiation table you didn't agree to. What you tolerate where you sleep negotiates your future. The energy in your room sets the tone for your breakthroughs, your clarity, your decisions, and even your health. Without boundaries, your prayer becomes fuel hitting resistance instead of doors opening. This is why alignment matters, why order matters, why paying attention to the unseen architecture of your room is just as critical as what you pray over. Now the third issue. This one blocks progress even when people fast, and most Christians get offended when it's mentioned. Now we reach the issue most people avoid, the one that rearranges how you look at your room forever. Who is spiritually authorized in that space? Not who visits your room, not who helps you move furniture, but who has had access, influence, or emotional presence in the place where you sleep. Because access leaves a trace, and traces create permission. Some permissions come from words spoken, confessions made in vulnerability, promises whispered in emotion, declarations spoken in anger, things said when your heart was open and your guard was down. Some permissions come from covenants you didn't know were covenants. Shared secrets, shared burdens, shared moments that felt small then, but carried spiritual weight you never took time to close. Some permissions come from activities you normalized in that room, habits that shaped your spirit more than your schedule, patterns repeated until they carve pathways you never meant to create. And here's what most people overlook. Your bedroom is more than a place to rest. It functions as a spiritual altar, whether you built it intentionally or not. Because wherever emotions run deep, wherever decisions are made in silence, wherever tears are wiped without witnesses, that place becomes a meeting point between your spirit and whatever listens for access. It doesn't matter if your bed is small or large, if your room is rented or owned. The moment you consistently sleep in a space, your spirit marks it as territory, which means this truth becomes unavoidable. Every altar answers to something. Prayer doesn't change that. Ignoring it doesn't cancel it. Pretending nothing is wrong doesn't silence the permissions already at work. Some believers fast, cry out, declare scripture with boldness, yet feel like something keeps interrupting their progress because the space where they rest is still legally answering to a past voice, a past season, a past influence that was never revoked. This is why you can feel spiritually strong outside your home, yet heavy the moment you return. Why clarity meets you at church or work, yet confusion waits for you when you enter your room. Because neutral ground doesn't exist in the spirit. Either your space is aligned with your future, or it pulls you back toward your past. Either your room reinforces who God is shaping you to become, or it echoes who once had access, even if you no longer speak to them, even if time has passed, even if you've moved on emotionally. The physical key may have changed, but the spiritual permission might still be active. Not because you chose it deliberately, but because you never closed it intentionally. And here's where the shift begins. Not in panic, not in fear, but in awareness. Awareness that the space where you sleep must match the future you're praying for, not the history you survived. Because once you understand who and what has authorization in your bedroom, you'll stop fighting battles outside that were actually rooted inside all along. And the moment you reclaim that authorization, not emotionally but spiritually, you begin to see progress where progress once stopped without reason. This is where transformation starts, when your room no longer answers to anything you didn't choose. Start by observing before you remove. Take note of what's in your room, what carries memory, attachment, or influence, without rushing to act. Then pray before you rearrange. Ask for discernment, guidance, and protection as you begin to shift your space. Close doors verbally. Declare what is no longer allowed access, who or what no longer has permission, and ask for divine covering over the room. Finally, rededicate the space intentionally. Pray over the corners, the bed, the walls, and every item remaining. Claim your bedroom as a place of rest, clarity, and alignment with your purpose. No shouting, no drama, just calm, steady authority, and the quiet assurance that the space where you sleep can now work with you, not against you. There is a specific prayer for reclaiming sleeping spaces, but that's for another teaching. Like this video so others don't stay stuck. Stay stuck. Subscribe because exposure brings movement. Progress doesn't disappear, it waits for alignment.